So I am now literally standing between you all and lunch. I hope you've had an enjoyable morning. I certainly have. And I'm going to pick up on some of the themes that you've already heard in this Future Manufacturing Ecosystems work stream. What I'm going to talk about is actually something that I reflected on to prepare for a session I was doing at IFM a couple of weeks back, which is about some of the enduring issues that, as we've been doing the Future Manufacturing Ecosystems work, we've identified. And these are things that haven't gone away, but if we can address them, because actually we know what we should do to solve them, we'll actually get much more closer to creating that manufacturing future that we want. And you heard from Ben earlier today, and I met Ben last year when I was visiting MIT, and I was very lucky to be part of their manufacturing symposium, so their sort of equivalent event to this back in May. And surprisingly, what word was barely mentioned? So this is the US people talking about the future of manufacturing. What word? We've heard it quite a lot this morning. They did talk about people. Ben's works talks about. They talked a lot about globalization, but the solution for them is deglobalization, sustainability. Basically, the American view of the future is deglobalization. Their problems have all been caused by globalization and China. So if they deglobalize, that will secure their future, and it might not be very nice for their partner countries. But a word that was barely mentioned in the entire day was sustainability. And a word that wasn't mentioned by anybody other than myself was the circular economy. Now, it's great to think, and actually some of my works looked at right shoring, that the future could be that we, this small nation, this island nation, is going to essentially be self-sufficient in everything, and we're going to do that by not being part of the rest of the globe, the world that we're part of. But think back to the origins of the first industrial revolution, which we started, and we started it because we had raw materials in the ground, we had access to highly qualified people, and we were at the centre of most of the global trade routes. We had supply chains that reached all over the world. Now, I would argue that every country in the world, not just the UK, needs to aim towards being self-sufficient in all of those products that are critical to life. And therefore, we need to be able to manufacture all of those things that are critical to life. And that's our food, our healthcare, our energy, our defence. And using words like deglobalisation aren't necessarily potentially so helpful. Perhaps this is the goal that we should seek to achieve. But what gets in the way of doing it? I asked this question the other day at Cambridge, but does anybody know which number Dyson that vacuum cleaner is? Yeah, you know. What one's that one? Yeah, it is. It's DC03. And I was actually employed by Dyson to be the manufacturing engineer for DC03. I get very worried now because they're at something like 87 or something, which then shows my age. So the numbering system's not quite so great. But the reason I'm going to talk about this is because I'm going to talk about these three enduring issues. Strategic misalignment, we heard about alignment this morning, short-term financial orientation, and our pursuit of consumption-driven economic growth. So yes, Sharon and I discovered that we actually used to work at Dyson at the same time a number of years back, and it was perhaps a time, but actually both of us ended up leaving because it wasn't necessarily the easiest place in manufacturing to pursue that balance between career and having a family. But why DC03 made me laugh? Are there any designers in the room? Anyone design background? So this was James's third vacuum cleaner. He was getting lots of prizes by this time, and he had this sticker down the front of it, which we affectionately, I best not say the name, what we called it, because it's slightly rude, but it begins with W and ends in Y, and it was about this long sticker. And this essentially had all his prizes on it. So obviously it was showing his prowess. This sticker cost about 12 pence, and it took one operator to apply it and another operator to reapply it because it was really hard to get on straight. Now, to cut a long story short, from a manufacturing perspective, we thought this was dreadful, but marketing told us it was essential. and we couldn't get them to change it. And this was at a time when Dyson was really trying to grow, so actually 2 operators and 12p was hitting the bottom line. Those operators could have been making other vacuum cleaners. And it wasn't until they did a test group, like a consumer focus group, and they realised what was the first thing a consumer did when they got that vacuum cleaner? They took the sticker off, that we had a justifiable reason to remove it. And that's an example of strategic misalignment. Product design, commercial strategy, and supply chain strategy not aligned. We make decisions about product design that actually sub-optimise our supply chain and are actually wasteful. Another example here is a tablet packing machine. I used to work for a pharmaceutical company, and a few years back I revisited them. And I was in tablets packing, and I saw that's a high-speed cartoner, and it wasn't working. People were manually putting cancer drugs into boxes. And I said, why is that? Oh, they said, packaging development put a curve on the box and it won't go through the cartoner. This is a cancer drug. The cancer patients don't even see the drug, let alone the box. So why are we wasting resource in this way? Why can we not get alignment between our product, our commercial, and our supply chain strategies? And maybe this links into the short-term financial orientation. Again, early in my research career, I did a lot of research in the Netherlands, interestingly, and I visited a company that was essentially doing the logistics for a very, very famous electronics firm that had been very badly affected by the first global economic crisis back in 2001. And essentially, they were making routers that at the time, because the internet was growing, were subject to, I suppose, new forms of technology coming in quite quickly. There'd been a downturn, they had a lot of stock, it had gone obsolete, they'd written it off, and it massively affected their share price. So going forward, they got cautious. They wanted to report to the stock market in a very consistent way. So essentially what they did, and I'm making the numbers up, but if in a financial quarter they knew they could sell 1,000 units, they would only report they could sell 950. And essentially what that meant, about 2 weeks before the end of each financial quarter, they stopped shipping to customers, which meant that essentially they had all their staff stopped and they stopped using their logistics providers. And then at the start of the next financial quarter, they had to pick up with that backlog. That meant this organisation, if they measured on-time and full delivery against promise date, it was about 99%. If they measured it against request date, it was 0.06%, and on average, their orders were 16 days late. And that was because reporting to the stock market and giving that impression of good financial management was more important than truly delivering shareholder value, because if you were truly delivering shareholder value, you'd be responding to customer value at lowest supply chain cost. And what they were doing was doing neither of those things. And another example would be the way we look at investment. Actually, John Burdett is here somewhere, but we did a lot of work together looking at how we made financial business cases for investment, particularly manufacturing plant. Now, anyone that works in manufacturing knows if you only produce the same product, it's quite easy to have a very high demonstrated capacity of about 85%. But if you've got any variability either in the product or the demand pattern, then typically speaking, your demonstrated capacity is about 60%. And that's what you need to have the inbuilt flex to be able to respond to upturns and downturns in demand. We can mathematically work this out, and you can work out whether you should keep buffer as inventory or buffer as spare manufacturing capacity. But either way, there is a cost to that buffer and a cost to that resilience. But our financial mindset, our financially driven organisations choose not to factor in the cost of that buffer, to take it out. And then we wonder why we're not as resilient as we should be. But perhaps the biggest demon of all is the way in which, for the last 250 years or so, we have grown through consumption-driven economic growth. We have presumed that in order to succeed, we need to buy more and more and more stuff. And then when we finish with it, we chuck it in the landfill. And then we wonder why we're crossing at least 6 to 8 of our planetary boundaries. The only way forward is to rethink that link between consumption and production, and to find ways to thrive and to succeed, not necessarily to grow, in a way that then protects our people, our profit, and our planet. And we were having a discussion yesterday at the InterAct board meeting our annual review with our funders, which is, you know, we look at our future manufacturing ecosystems scenarios. They have ones that focus on resilience, ones that focus on productivity, some that focus on sustainability. And you know what? 20 years of research, any of you that work in manufacturing will know those three things are inextricably linked. If you improve one, you'll improve the others. It doesn't really matter which one you focus on. You can change the narrative, support who you're talking to, but you improve. If you can get flow in your supply chain, manage your buffers well, you'll be resilient, you'll be sustainable, and you'll be productive. But the thing that you won't necessarily do is ensure fairness in that chain, to make sure that you don't have an OEM or a supermarket at the front of the chain exploiting the rest of the parties in that chain. What you won't make sure is that everyone in the UK can get the food they need, or can get the access to a washing machine or a dishwasher that they might need. Because actually what's happened in our country and around the world more than anything else is we've created a divide between those that have and those that do not have. And actually, by rethinking this link and looking at business models that link to a more circular economy, are more servitised, we could make sure that everybody can get access to all the things that they need. And so the opportunity is we should have a shared purpose. Everybody in this room, everyone in our country should want to create the manufacturing future that we want together. And to do this, we need to start at the top of our corporates. We probably need more people that actually understand about operations and supply chain. I'm obviously very biased. But we need strategically aligned business. How tricky is that? How tricky is it to have a business where your product, your commercial and your supply chain strategy are aligned? And they need to be aligned around the triple bottom line. And we need to change the way we finance and actually start to think about long-term financial orientation. We need to think back to the likes of Cadbury's and to Rowntree's and to those different ways where we invested back into our community and not back to greedy shareholders. And last but not least, and most importantly of all, we have to rethink growth, and we must decouple consumption from production.